Minister Justin Trudeau has yet to publicly respond to Trump's ongoing comments about Canada becoming a state or his reference to him as Governor Justin Trudeau. So how should the federal government be responding against the backdrop of Trump threatening to impose a 25% blanket tariff on all Canadian imports January 20th, which is just over a month away? Here to answer that question is Jean Charest, former Premier of Quebec and former federal cabinet minister, as well as Gary Doer, who is a former Premier of Manitoba and ambassador to the United States. Hi to both of you. Thank you very much for making the time for the conversation. Mr. Charest, I'll start with you because you posted also a message about what Donald Trump had posted to social media, saying that every Canadian, regardless of their opinion of the Prime Minister or political affiliation, should feel deeply offended by President Trump's remarks. Why do you think that?
Well, the idea that an American president, even if he's using humor, and this is Donald Trump, we all know, but even using humor, which is in itself, Vassy, a language, saying that we should be the 51st state, really is a wake-up call for Canada. And, you know, I look at the bigger picture. This country of ours has lost its narrative in the last 20 years. And we are very close to the United States, very dependent on them. But we should be seriously looking at ourselves and what we are doing, what our trade policies are, what our diplomacy is, where we are in the world, and have a very serious debate about what we want to be and what position we want to be in the rest of the world. For example, on infrastructure, on energy, obviously, we're captive of a single American market. We should be building the infrastructure to bring oil and gas to tidewater, whether it's LNG or other words. On strategic minerals, I'd add this. The Americans and the rest of the world need our strategic minerals. Why I think we should have a very serious discussion about how we transform them here in our country. This debate's been around since Confederation. Maybe Mr. Trump is going to do us a favor and force us to have that discussion today. Same thing for Canada's North and security issues, for which we know we have been derelict in our responsibility to occupy the sovereignty of our North. So maybe Mr. Trump is doing us a favor. He'll force us to have a hard look at ourselves and what our position is in the world and what we want to do with this country in the next 20 to 30 years.
Mr. Doer, do you view this potentially as a wake-up call in the same way?
Well, I certainly think it's not. I do believe Canada is a proud, sovereign country, and we should speak accordingly. And we should, as Premier Charest has said, act accordingly. And we've chatted before about this issue, but I still think we're being very negligent in our part of the neighborhood of North America by not agreeing to go to the 2% requirement under NATO and dedicating it to our Arctic neighborhood. We should have F-35 planes in Cold Lake, Alberta, in northern Quebec, rather than being scrambled from Minot, North Dakota, to intercept Russian planes coming over the Arctic. So I think we are a strong sovereign country. But when we sign a piece of paper committing ourselves to 2% of GDP for military spending, our signatures on that document, we shouldn't go to the Wall Street Journal and say, and leak, apparently leaking is part of the culture in Ottawa, leak that we're going to not fulfill that commitment to the Wall Street Journal, and then have 50, 60, 70 senators sign a document calling on us to meet our commitments. I know when I was in Washington, when the U.S. wanted us to support them in Afghanistan, we were there. When they wanted us to go to the Syrian mission to deal with ISIS, we were there. When they wanted a Francophone general to deal with the French and the American Air Force in Libya, Prime Minister Harper sent a French-speaking general to that mission. So I just think we've lost some of that stuff by not showing up as a sovereign country. And you can't sign a piece of paper. You know, the oldest rule of politics and business, you know, your word is your bond. And right now, our word is not our bond.
So if I gather from both of what you're saying, Mr. Charest, like the actions we take are very important, right, in sort of asserting our sovereignty. As far as a response in the near term, like from a communications perspective even, what is your best advice to either the federal government or even provincial governments, because we've got lots of premiers responding, as well? Like, should there be someone sending the message more directly, hey, we're not going to be the 51st state, or is the best course to just kind of lay low?
Well, a number of us, Vassy, are, I think, a little surprised that the federal government has not been better prepared for the aftermath of the election campaign. Whether Harris or Trump, there should have been a very detailed plan to move ahead in the days that follow the election campaign. Madame Harris was also very, protectionist. And what is a plan about? It boils down to a few simple things. A, identify what our vital interests are. B, identify what it is that the Americans want from us. What is it that we can offer them that they need and for which we can negotiate and put on the table? And finally, what is it that we want from them? It's pretty straightforward. And then the idea is that we organize ourselves, not just with the provinces, so that we walk with a single message, but also with the business community throughout all of this, Vassy. I mean, the business community, if you talk to them, are quite concerned that they haven't yet really been called into the room to work with the federal government to identify these basic things. That's what we first need to do. And then you move ahead. We don't need to react to what Mr. Trump says every time he tweets. We know the modus operandi, hits us over the head, gets a reaction, takes whatever we give him, and then negotiates. And we don't have to, but he's nonetheless sending us a pretty powerful message about ourselves, and that we have to get ourselves organized. And Gary's quite right. I mean, on the issue of defense in the Arctic, this issue's been around a pretty long time. And no one should be surprised. And it says something about Canada that we haven't got our act together on that. So why don't we look at this as an opportunity to do exactly that? We need to have a hard look at Canada. We have to stop taking Canada for granted, and that we'll always be there. We've been complacent. It's been easy. Now this is a different world, and we're going to have to work hard. We may have to sacrifice, by the way. We may have to, there'll be a price to pay for us to be able to assert ourselves in the world. But do we want to be a sovereign country? Do we want to be Canadians? Do we want to make our contribution? If we do, now's the time to get our act together.
I think that, Mr. Doer, the feds would probably argue that they did have they did have a plan, that they were preparing for each eventuality. But it's also hard not to argue that whatever they had planned seems to be subsumed by domestic politics right now. Are you concerned about the way in which that is unfolding and the overall impact that might have on our ability to either escape the imposition of those tariffs a month from now, or be free of them at some point thereafter?
Well, just this week, having the chaos in Ottawa, which is understood by the powers that be in the United States, is, here we are. We made a pretty good announcement on the border. We've got support for that announcement from all the premiers in Canada. We have to make it much more visible. We used to have a shipwriter program with RCMP officers and U.S. Coast Guards on the Great Lakes and in the ocean areas. We should take that very, very seriously. But the media coverage is Trudeau going to run or not run, both in Canada and in the United States. This announcement on fentanyl, I was at a coffee shop this morning, and people were really happy we were doing something on fentanyl. And they were happy Canada was doing it for Canadians. So we're not following good media practices by burying our lead all the time with this other stuff going on about, who's singing to who at the Liberal Christmas party last night, or holiday party. I better be politically correct. So we've got to get our act together. The other thing is, breaking news, Trudeau and Trump don't get along well. And it started in Charleroi in the G7 meeting. And I remember that meeting, Trump wanted to get out of there early. He went to the podium early, and he said, and the media asked him a question about tariffs. He said, maybe we should just get rid of all tariffs. And I said to somebody watching the news coverage at my cottage, I said, maybe Trudeau should just go up there with a pen. Where do I sign? Because Trump was heading off to meet the North Korean president. And I know that if it was Mulroney or Chrétien or Harper, they would have walked up to the podium with a pen and said, yes, we agree, no tariffs. They got rid of softwood lumber. But we don't have that going on right now. And then we follow that up with attacking, Trump through Harris not getting elected. I mean, talk about putting the puck in your own net. It is unbelievable. The first job of a prime minister is Canadian unity. The second job is to get along with the president and the government of the United States. And I can't believe you were at that event, Vassy, so you know it better than I do. But you must have just groaned, but you can't admit that.
I cannot. No comment. I will leave our discussion there. I can't tell you how much I appreciate both of you making the time for the conversation. Your analysis is very, very valuable. Thank you. Jean Charest and Gary Doer. Thanks.
We got lots
to see you. Did you want to say something?
Trails, Vassy, John, and I, but with Sonny Perdue, but that's for another interview.
Okay, I'll save it. I hope you'll both join me again. Thank you, Jean Charest and Gary Doer.
Bye-bye.
After a